Welcome to Conversations from Stritch. Today is Thursday, January 29th. I'm Dr. David Livingston, president of Lewis University, and I'm joined by Dr. Christopher Sint, our provost. It's been a great week, another great week at Lewis. Yesterday was the Winter Engagement Fair. This fair is a campus-wide event designed to connect students with Lewis University student clubs and organizations, as well as campus offices, and give them a sense of the involvement opportunities that are available to them in the spring semester. It's held during our extended community hour, and the fair really creates an opportunity for students to get a sense of what it might be to belong to the community in a different way. It encourages students to explore new ways to engage fully in that co-curricular part of life, everything outside of the classroom. This year's fair had over 300 student attendees. There were 17 campus departments that were there, and almost 60 student clubs and organizations, which really creates an atmosphere where I guess what I would say is almost every student can find something that they're interested in. There's just such a range of opportunities that you can really find what you're looking for. I will say, if you missed yesterday's fair, please go online. All the clubs and organizations are available, and you can always stop and see the student involvement professionals that are in the basement of the Gaffney Center. Last night was the Flyer Red Dinner. The Flyer Red Dinner happens once a year. It is the Lewis University Athletics signature annual gala. It celebrates the induction of the former student athletes who are now entering into the Hall of Fame. Coaches are inducted. Last night we had a trainer inducted. The event serves as a major fundraising and community building evening. It brings together alumni, faculty, donors, and friends that support the operations of Flyer Athletics, but also really supports our student athletes. And I have to say, from my own perspective, last night was just an amazing night. We celebrated some incredible people. I was really struck with the quality and just how impressive each one of the student athletes were, what they've gone on to do with their lives, but also the team sensibility that we had. And Jeff DeGraw, I thought, did a great job. So it was just a really wonderful night. Grateful for everybody that showed up. Thanks to John and his team. You know, we had him on a couple weeks ago, and it was just a great event. Tomorrow, Dr. Sint and I are both going to the annual meeting of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities in Washington, D.C. This is a great opportunity for us to connect with other leaders at Catholic institutions, to learn from the speakers and presentations that are put on, and of course from the informal conversations, which I often find to be just those hallway conversations are just so valuable. Chris is heading up the group of chief academic officers and their institute, and really grateful for him and his leadership on a national level doing that. And then early next week, I will be staying over to talk to legislators. So we have the National Association of Independent Colleges and Universities, we call NICU. They tell us a lot about the legislation, so we have a few meetings, mostly on Monday, and then on Tuesday we go to Capitol Hill. I think we have about 12 appointments with different legislators, both on the Senate side and the House side. We're able to talk about what the needs of Lewis are, some of the challenges we're facing based on legal and regulatory environment. And then we're also able to hear from legislators about their concerns or some of the things that we might have opportunities to be involved in. So it's a good opportunity, both a two-way street in conversations. And, I will say, for those that maybe don't think of it this way, because of our multiple campuses, because we have a campus here in Romeoville where we're sitting right now, but also in Uptown in Chicago, in Little Village in Chicago. We also have one in Aurora. And I'm talking now here just Illinois and Oak Brook. Different legislators have sway over those different districts. They're in different districts. So we have an opportunity to tell the story of what happens in Uptown versus what might happen in Oak Brook versus what might happen here in Romeoville. And it's a great opportunity to continually tell the Lewis story and get people excited about investing in our students. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris with some updates on some exciting news and accomplishments.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be with everyone this afternoon. And I also had a really good time last night at the Flyer Red Dinner. It is an inspiring event where we really get to learn about some just amazing people, amazing teams, amazing coaches, and the whole, like you said, the whole span of people who work in athletics and attend and are student athletes. Really inspiring night, and also just great to see so many students taking advantage of the winter engagement fair, and getting involved, finding new things to do as the spring semester starts, whether you're a new student to Lewis or a returning student. So a few things happening coming up soon. Mountain Film on Tour, one of America's longest running film festivals. I believe it's an outgrowth of the Telluride Film Festival. Will stop at Lewis University's Romeoville campus this Saturday night in De La Salle Hall. First with a reception at 6:30 in the Courtyard Cafe, and then with film screenings in the Damien Auditorium. The films, handpicked from the Mountain Film Festival, celebrate stories of the indomitable spirit and aim to inspire audiences. So these are short films. I don't know exactly how many it will be, but it's a night where they really celebrate short films and really of really excellent caliber. It's super cool that we're doing it, and I'm so glad we have the Damien Theater now to be able to have an event like that, or have a visitors on campus focused on film. So I encourage people to look into that. Try to go on Saturday night. Proceeds from the event support the Lewis University Annual Fund. On February 4th, the Lewis Innovation Hub, Entrepreneurship Club, and Women in Business Club are hosting Dori Asufi, founder of the iconic Chicago-based brand Molly's Cupcakes. During a community hour next week, it's in Borromeo 171. Asufi will be sharing her journey as an entrepreneur and her insights as a woman leading a business. So, and then following the talk at 2:30, students are invited to the Pitch Prep Pizza Palooza. I'm glad I don't have a microphone right in front of my mouth when I say those 4 Ps. Clinic, which will provide one-on-one support for completing and submitting their Brother Joel Damien business pitch application. So it's a great combination of different clubs in the College of Business, as well as an incredible speaker with preparation for the Damien business pitch applications, which, to remind everyone, is part of our celebration of scholarship, which we'll be announcing soon, or talking about soon. So both of those events are free and open to all students. Then on February 11th, Dr. Kelly Carter Jackson will lead a conversation about racial justice and historical resilience at 12:30 in the University Dining Room. Dr. Carter Jackson is a nationally recognized author and historian on Black resistance. This is part of our second annual Lewis University Black History Month Scholar Conversation, and attendees will have the opportunities to buy and discuss her new book, We Refuse, A Forceful History of Black Resistance, as well as meeting her in an exclusive signing. Registration is still open and will be open up to the day of the event, so please plan on coming to that, but let us know if you're coming. And then finally, congratulations to Professor Dr. Jamil Mustafa, who recently published a chapter in a book called Disability, Illness, and the Vampire in Literature and Culture, published by Routledge last fall. His chapter focuses on 2 films, Martin and The Transfiguration, which the chapter discusses how the films blur the lines between vampirism and mental illness. It highlights themes of vampires, vampire hunters, sanity versus insanity, and it deconstructs the relationship between disabilities, fact, and fiction. So I mentioned a couple of the events coming up, but we have a lot more things. So let's turn it to you to share those events.
A few more, and just on a couple of those notes, I'm really enjoying the book that's going to be discussed. Yeah. I'm about a third of the way through it, but it's very, I'd say, provocative. It just raises all sorts of really provocative questions. So, and the other thing I would say is, this vampire genre is very popular these days as one of the films, now with the most most nominations for Oscars is a vampire-based film. So Jamil is definitely on track with a really interesting.
Yeah, I see those two things coming together.
Yeah. So anyway, so things coming up. Today we have an online translanguaging 101 theory and practice event going on. The Delta Sigma Pi dinner with the brothers is happening over in St. Charles Borromeo. We also have women's basketball and men's basketball tonight against Drury. I will just say our women's team has won 10 straight, and they're playing against the perennial powerhouse in women's basketball, Drury. It'll be quite the matchup tonight. So if you have some time, definitely head over to Neil Carey. It'll be a great night. The other thing that's going on tonight, for those of you that haven't been involved before, the open mic night that happens over in Lockport at Embers Tap House is happening tonight starting at 7:30. That is really a great event. If you've never been to one, you don't have to get up on stage the first time you go, but seeing people do some comedy or read some poetry, it's just a really great celebration of the talent on our campus. Tomorrow, we have a bunch of stuff going on. Juma Friday prayers going on, the chess club, as you see, and then men's volleyball will host UC San Diego. Then over the weekend, on Saturday, we also have women's basketball and men's basketball hosting Missouri S&T. As was already talked about, the Mountain Film Festival. I really, we're going to be, like you said, we're leaving tomorrow, but there's a lot going on that I wish I could attend this weekend. That's true of, it feels like almost every day on this campus and certainly every weekend. Sunday, the LaSallian Scholarship Program. We also have men's hockey, which is hosting a game against the Milwaukee School of Engineering. And then, of course, Mass on Sunday night. Next week, early Monday, the Delta Sigma Pi informal seminar is happening. Valentine's, Commuter Day. We're exploring Rome's treasures. That's an event, conversation over in Arts and Science 195. And then Carrie Johnson Barrasso, the new piano music, will happen in Convocation Hall next Tuesday night. And then on Wednesday, of course, we have our big community hour. You can see all these events that are on there. There's a bunch of things going on, from political science issues, the Molly Cupcakes thing. I did want to mention, Chris certainly mentioned that this is a part of Celebration of Scholarship, but that entrepreneurial contest, the Joel Damian, that contest for the business competition, that's kind of like a Shark Tank thing. There's real significant money involved in that. So if you have a business idea and you need a couple grand to get it off the ground, if you win this contest, there's that kind of money available, and you can certainly check out the business competition by going over there next Wednesday. We also have Chess Club meeting next Wednesday, another translanguaging workshop that'll be happening, playing Jeopardy, and just so much more that is going on campus. Now, in terms of, I've talked about the events, athletic events that'll be on campus, but next week we also have some traveling over the weekend and into next week. So women's bowling will be at the Saints Invite down in Missouri. Men's lacrosse, gosh, it's still so cold to be playing lacrosse outside, but they're going to be at Northwood. And then softball's heading down to Dallas for the Lone Star D2 College Classic. This is that time of year where we really get a sense that the spring sports are just getting started, but they have to travel south to play. So we'll see some of that as spring break comes up in a few weeks as well. And then men's volleyball is going down to McKendree. I will say McKendree has really come on in the last few years. Lewis has been a perennial powerhouse, but when McKendree added men's volleyball, they really have played incredibly well lately. So that should be a really good match as well. All right, so we have a great guest today. I'm really excited about the topic. For some people, it might be maybe a little less interesting than a volleyball coach, but I will say for me personally, this is one of my favorite topics. So we'll let Chris introduce our guest.
Well, we have a guest who is equally as storied as our men's volleyball coach in his own right, as a leader at Lewis and a strategic leader in enrollment management. Today we're joined by Ray Kennelly, who serves as our Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer here, where he leads institutional initiatives, strategic partnerships, long-term planning. He works closely with the president and the senior leadership on enrollment, finance, and mission-aligned growth initiatives across the university, and we'll ask him more about his time at Lewis. So before I turn it to him and to our conversation, remember you can email a question to askus@lewisu.edu. Ray, welcome. So great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. After that great introduction, maybe we just wrap up the show right now and call it a day. Thanks so much. No, appreciate being here.
It's great to have you.
One of the things I wanted to ask right away is just, well, maybe you could talk a little bit about how long you've been here at Lewis. I know you've been on the show several times, but there's always new people needing to get to know you. And then the both of you maybe could talk a little bit about why we have a chief strategy officer and how that came about.
Yeah, no, so Lewis, it's nearly 24 years at Lewis, which is an incredible amount of time. When I think about it, it's gone very quickly, but I have spent my entire academic career in higher education, starting at Wittenberg University in Ohio. Dominican University was a little segue during my time here at Lewis, but returned back, but really came up through the ranks of admission, financial aid, enrollment management, marketing, and that's been my focus until that opportunity and conversation Dave and I initially had in his office when he kind of outlined that through conversations with the board leadership and some of the committees, there was discussion about who on your team, who at Lewis really spends most of their time thinking about the near future, the far future, and is thinking about the strategies that might be necessary for Lewis to continue to be successful into the future. And when you initially put that in front of me, I think because my entire career prior to that was all admission enrollment management, and it felt kind of unclear in some ways, I hesitated. My initial reaction was, I'm not so sure I want to.
That's interesting.
But with a little time to process it, a little bit more conversation with Dave, with yourself, with some members of the board, it really crystallized in my mind that at this moment for higher education, it was a really exciting opportunity. And so I got over that initial fear of stepping into a role that didn't previously exist. And kind of charting a way forward, and nearly 4 years in, it's been kind of re-energizing for me, in many ways, and it's really allowed me to interact with the university community in a slightly different way than those prior years, and so it's been a really exciting engagement.
Well, it's been, I got to say, from my perspective, because it was a little risky, I think, for both of us and for the university. It's turned out, to exceed my expectations on so many levels. And that's, a lot to do with your professionalism, all and your willingness to kind of jump in. I will also say that for a place like Lewis, this is one of the benefits to being a strong financial organization, is we have the capacity to do that. I talked to other presidents and they're like, how do you do all this stuff? How have you done stuff in mergers and acquisitions, or how have you done stuff with partnership with organizations or other schools? And when I can say, well, I have somebody who gets up every day and all he thinks about is this stuff, it changes the equation, because they're kind of trying to say, take 5 or 10 hours out of somebody who already has a 60-hour-a-week job and try to put them into, can you think about this stuff? And I think that is just, much more difficult. Now, you're the one that does it every day, but I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that, like how it might be different if you had been asked to do this on the side of doing enrollment management versus, and because you talk to other people that are in these roles, some of them part-time, some of them full-time, but there aren't many schools that are able to do a full-time person.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one great example that I think about is the re-emergence of the prison education program. And so I think of the long arc that occurred from the notification from the Department of Education that the Second Chance Pell program was going to be reopened.
Right.
But the time necessary to really track down the people in the Department of Education, the time necessary to reach out, connect, and start to build the relationships with the Illinois Department of Corrections, the time to reach out to other prison education programs around the country and really understand how you architect and put that together, to then build and do those site visits and build those relationships and rapport, and then to eventually have it come to fruition, hire a phenomenal director. But my point being, if that was on the B list or on the secondary list for a role,
Yeah.
you could easily see you would just lose track, lose time.
Yeah.
The person from IDOC, the Illinois Department of Corrections, didn't get back to you. Maybe weeks would go by. But this allowed that more intensity of focus that you could really work something through to completion.
Yeah, I think it's a great example. I mean, something that still took us probably 3 years, right, would have taken 6 or 7.
Yes.
Right. Or maybe it would have never
never
really
happened,
come
yeah.
to fruition because, and I think, as you said, Michelle's been on this program before, great leader, but in order to even get to the point where you know what a job description would be like, and she had to be convinced to leave an institution that already was having her do this half-time to go to and she had to trust that, and that was a big part of your role as well.
Yeah, so maybe if I could maybe clarify that question, or turn that into more of a question for both of you, or you, Ray, where does your role end? Like with that example or other examples, like what part do you play in a huge new initiative, which eventually includes many people? And
Yeah, this is this is probably in some ways the good part of my role, and then maybe for others in the Lewis University community, sort of the lament of my role. So I get to spend a lot of time on initiation, identification of opportunities, the exploration, the investigation, and what I would call all that due diligence work and sort of starting to bring something into play. But then one of the things that Dave and others have encouraged me, and we've heard it in some of the board meetings, is there's always a point in that arc where you need to hand that off into the internal community and let the internal structure take that over, because your role is about going out to find that next new opportunity. And so in some ways it's there's a little bit of it's hard to let go sometimes, to say, wow, you've kind of worked on something, but it's actually, to me, it's been worked so well because there are so many new opportunities available, and it goes back to that idea of being able to focus and concentrate. So sometimes, I mean, people have been really responsive, but in casual conversations on campus, some people will say to me, slow down.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
I don't want you to hand off another thing.
Before we move to the broader strategic plan about the next few years, could you just give people a sense, maybe listing off some of the projects you've been involved in? Because I think there are some people who are listening who wouldn't even know you were involved in prison education. They're like, oh, I've met Michelle.
Because they're like the third person in the handoff.
Yeah, because they come in at a certain time and it's like, well, Michelle's already here. It's already running. She's got her faculty who teach in the program, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe you could talk, as you said, over the last 3.5, 4 years, what are some of the projects that you've been involved in, both maybe some that are currently ongoing, but also some that you've handed off, so to speak?
Yeah, maybe some really quick highlights. I mean, one of just the initial things that came out was a relationship with Silver Cross Hospital and our nursing program, where we structured an agreement with them where graduates of our nursing program could get student loan relief if they accepted employment and stayed. And another one of those examples of that took a lot of negotiation and conversation and meetings with Silver Cross Hospital, but that was one of those early partnership agreements we were able to establish and put into play. Prison education we've addressed. the most notable one obviously has been the work with St. Augustine College and the merger kind of acquisition work, as well as now some of the partnering we have more recently been engaged with Christian Brothers University, as well as some of the real bigger swings aside from some of the smaller initiatives under the surface.
And kind of what's the, and then maybe I'll turn to Chris and he can, kind of, the two of you can introduce the strategic plan. But I think the other part of this that is a benefit for Lewis is that there's stuff you spend time on, you might spend 2 or 3 months on, and it never goes anywhere. And therefore, the only people that might know about it are like 4 or 5 of us on campus, right? Because there's a inquiry from our side or their side, there's some real work that goes on, and like any entrepreneurial thing, you're not gonna, not everything's gonna turn into something. And that's something that I think personally is such an energizing aspect of our university, because we know there's always 5 or 6 irons in the fire, but if one of them turns out each of those times, that's a win. But maybe you could talk a little bit about maybe how much time you spend on things that quote unquote don't turn out, but you learn from, right? You're learning things from.
I think that's a great question, and there's not an infinite capacity for us as an institution to take on every opportunity, and so part of the discipline of the work is the evaluation tools, the metrics, the financial due diligence underneath it to really determine, does this opportunity make sense? Because there's an opportunity cost if you invest all your time. So, I can say we have turned away far more opportunities than we have engaged in because they did not fit our strategic plan or strategic vision, or it wasn't a financially beneficial opportunity, or we couldn't just come to those kinds of agreements that would make sense to where it's a win for both institutions. And so, yes, along the way there's a Rolodex full of those conversations that have not matured into an opportunity, but what has been great about that is the learning that occurs. It's kind of sharpened our focus as to what opportunities we're looking for, and another part of the job is also the outreach. Sometimes I think there's the impression we're just waiting for people to come to us, but there's also the outreach we do to areas that we've identified or entities we've identified that we think would be good partners for us as well.
It's great. I think it's just so valuable.
Yeah, really more of a comment than a question, and then we'll transition to the strategic plan. But I really like what you said earlier, Dave, which is that it's a position at the university where you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about it, and I think that makes a huge difference in what your primary function is or your job is at a university, or anywhere, because it's really about what you're obsessing over when you're not working is really so powerful in terms of all the creativity that you've brought to it over these 4 years really comes from being able to focus on it and not thinking about enrollment goals or whatever the job is that you do when you were doing before. So I think that's really powerful. So we are going to talk. So we want to talk about our strategic plan that's in development. We've been working on it for 8 months or so. It really began in the community at Convocation this year, where we laid out some principles that we're going to share again in a minute, and also had great discussions during Convocation, and as well as several steps along the way since then, both with the Lewis community as well as with the board of trustees, who focused on it a lot in its fall meetings. And anyway, we're at a point where we've established some pillars that we're working on and some working groups that are moving forward. But I think one thing that we have done that I want to ask about first is switched from a 5-year strategic planning process, which is pretty standard, to a 3-year process? And both of you, either of you could answer this, but why have we made that switch?
Yeah, I think, I think when I think about the history of the strategic planning at Lewis, really quickly, there's 6 formal strategic plan documents for plans over the years. And, as you kind of review back and look at those, it sort of paints a really interesting picture of, I would call it like the maturing of Lewis as an institution. And then when you look at our most recent plan, which was a 5-year strategic plan, we are actually kind of concluding it 1 year early.
Right, that's right,
because of that sense right now, and maybe it started with COVID, but it certainly feels like the external dynamics are accelerating all around us. Life is moving faster. The external world is moving faster. Industry is moving faster. And there's this sense of longer arc strategic plans may not be as responsive as a shorter view. So we've made collectively the decision to use a 3-year model because the external environment is changing, and part of our strategy as an institution embedded in the strategic plan is to be proactive, to be transformative, and to be thinking ahead. And the 3-year model, I think, is going to put us in an even more dynamic mode going forward. It also aligns very well with the 100-year anniversary for Lewis. So the second 3-year plan, the 29 to 2032, will align us with our 100-year centennial celebration.
Yeah, I think it's great. And just, I think we said this at the beginning, but senior VP and chief strategy officer. So this is part of the, it's this kind of entrepreneurial thing and the strategy, and those two kind of coalesce.
Connected,
So one of the things as we started talking about this, and we can show this slide in a second, but maybe you can talk through it, is the kind of parameters for thinking around directionally where we're going. So we had to kind of, I feel like however you define it, you have to create the sandbox, you got to create the curbs on the road, but could you talk a little bit about kind of how you think about that? I know you spend a lot of time thinking about strategy and reading about strategy, meeting with people who do strategic thinking, but maybe the importance of setting out those guideposts that define kind of we're staying in these lanes.
Yeah, and I think, one thing in reflecting on this whole process related to that too is oftentimes in strategic planning and for many universities, it becomes like a single activity, right? It kind of shuts the university down for a year. And I think what we have started to do, and I think it's the maturing of the planning process and the way the internal culture kind of has embraced strategic opportunities and change, is the plans sort of flow from one to the other. So the guiding principles that were crafted to lead this next strategic plan really are flowing from the current strategic plan and the directions that we've moved in and the things we believe are making a difference for Lewis that we don't want to veer away from. There could be much more work accomplished within these guiding principles. There could be areas that we feel we could lean into even more heavily to push them forward, but we feel like these guiding principles that are here really set the tone and the direction for how we see Lewis continuing to succeed in the future and really remaining true to who we are in terms of our mission and our identity and our brand.
Right.
And so it still gives a lot of room for creativity and innovation, but it's a really nice model in that we're not just closing the door on the current strategic plan and acting like we're starting brand new all over again.
Yeah.
It allows for this more continuous flow.
So I'd be interested, most of the stuff that was on there, I think is easy for people to understand. There's one of them, I think it's the fourth or fifth bullet point, that talks about continuing to brace those at the peripheries. Could both of you maybe comment on what that means, why that's a Lassallean concept, and how it, again, flavors the approach to strategic planning?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with that one. That expression, the peripheries, is an expression that the Christian Brothers have really taken. I believe it comes from Pope Francis, from a speech from Pope Francis originally, but it really it's a new way, or a current way of talking about people who are marginalized in society. Those of us who have worked here a long time know that that's a core goal of the Christian Brothers, and to be able to provide access and the resources and the support for students to be successful, no matter where they come from or where they, where they enter into the relationship with Lewis in this case. And we had a dimension of this in the last strategic plan, for example, called Meeting Students Where They Are. The prison education program is an example of something that was done in that context, in the strategic plan that's concluding this year. And so I think by putting that as one of our guiding principles, we're saying that we will continue to not only live the mission through an interest in poverty and people who have been marginalized by society, but also do creative, strategic things to serve the peripheries, as he calls them.
Yeah, I think of that. I think of that old saying. It's like a rubber band. Once stretched, never goes back to its original shape, and it feels like with every new engagement, whether that's international students, prison education, bilingual students through St. Augustine, it sort of stretches us as an institution, and we never go back. I mean, it kind of leads us forward in extending our reach to more and more populations.
I think it's just great. And again, each one of those guiding principles are important. I just thought that's one that maybe some people would be like, what does that mean? So there's another slide that really outlines, but maybe as we talk about the 5 pillars that might be up here, could you talk a little bit about the process? And again, Ray, you can start, and Chris might add to it. So there's a process we're underway. Chris started with this sense that, and I would even go back to our leadership team retreat last June. We said maybe we need to start this up for the fall. Then we prepared over the summer for convocation. We talked to the community about it at convocation. We're going to do a new planning process a year early. We talked to the board. Where are we at now after that? So those things we've already kind of talked about. Now we're in let's get down into the kind of weeds and let's get a real plan going. So could you talk about the process now?
Yeah, so each of those opportunities over those months and those conversations, and a special thanks to Lindsay Bachner, our project manager, who assembled all that feedback in a way that we could process it and organize it. So that output sort of led us to the development of the pillars of the next plan, sort of 5 key areas. And we worked with the expanded leadership team to kind of review those pillars, to kind of further elaborate on the strategy around them. And now we have assigned and nominated 2 co-chairs for each pillar. They have identified, and we've invited in within each group about 10 additional members of the Lewis community. So now those 5 pillars have about 10 to 12 people focusing on them. So a total of 50 to 60 members of the Lewis community directly engaging in the work to really try to articulate within each of those pillars and themes the strategies and directions that they would recommend back to the leadership team. And The exciting part of this is over these next few weeks, in between now and into early March, there's going to be targeted opportunities both in person and online to invite the entire Lewis community back into the process. So we started with the entire Lewis community at Convocation.
Right.
We had other smaller groups with input opportunities, and now as it's more refined and developed, we'll invite the entire Lewis community back in to continue to give feedback. So
I think we have those 5 pillars. I don't know if we have that slide that we could put up. So maybe we could, and again, maybe any of us can jump in, but maybe we just talk a little bit about each one of these in really, kind of relatively tight, but because I think what you're saying that's really important to me is there's going to be opportunities over the next month. We want people to take advantage of that.
Yes.
So if you're really interested in strategic growth, show up on this day, because these 10 or 12 people are going to really listen to you and what are your ideas, right?
So and they're
maybe
really
you could talk
ideas
through
for, I would say they're ideas for initiatives that forward these buckets, forward these ideas, pillars.
And
forward.
The richness of this is from all the input and the conversations. It's not any one of us sitting in a room thinking this up. All of this has come from that feedback, and we want to keep soliciting that feedback. So, future ready learning very quickly is really about an eye towards both the impact and potential influence of AI, the way different pedagogies are evolving, the way we use hybrid, the different learning models and styles, but that we have to continue to evolve our approaches to learning, and particularly with an eye towards AI and what those implications might be.
Maybe the needs of the workforce in the future. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to go back and forth?
Inclusive impact is the area where we really are thinking about the peripheries and thinking about providing access and supporting students so that they can succeed. A whole range of different types of Lewis students can be as successful as possible.
And in that one, it could be, I guess what I want to note is, it could be new populations that we really don't serve as well. For instance, bilingual, prison education are 2 examples, international, a third that we didn't go back 10 years. We didn't serve them in the way we do now. But it could also be students that we're already serving, and there's ideas about how we can do it better.
Absolutely.
Best in practice, best in class practice around how you serve this group of students that really creates a, we've talked about belonging a lot, and we have a new focus on belonging. So an inclusive community is a place where everybody feels like they belong.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we enhance that?
And these things are always sort of going on in the past, present, and future. Just because we're planning it doesn't mean we're doing it. The translanguaging a seminar that starts at 1:00, it would fit perfectly as an initiative in that.
So what about strategic growth? Right?
Yeah,
What does that look like? Or
well,
what are the confines of that pillar?
Yeah, we think growth has been sort of a foundational focus of Lewis, I think, throughout our history, and I think even in these more challenging higher ed times, there is a certain stability that comes from growth, the ability to continue to invest in new and different initiatives. And so I think we believe as an institution that our growth has supported us advancing our mission, being able to invest in important initiatives, and that future growth is going to be important to our thriving self.
So we want people to show up on these Wednesday, or the meetings will happen whenever they happen, but we'll get you'll hear about those. If somebody has ideas, show up to that one if you're like, I have this great idea for how we could grow this program or add this program, enhance opportunities. High performing culture. Chris, do you want to?
That's really about the people in our community who serve students who work in a whole range of different capacities all across the university at different campuses, and creating culture change, or a culture where all of us feel deeply committed to the work and inspired by the work and supported and as best as we can be, and just being a community together.
Right.
And then the last one is
Thriving innovation.
You want to do that?
Thriving innovation. So what is, I mean, you're involved in, I mean, that's that kind of innovative spirit that we've talked about at the beginning of our conversation with you, but maybe you talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, it's in some ways part of our entrepreneurial spirit, the way we have really evolved as a culture that doesn't sit statically, that thinking ahead, thinking about the future, what are the new opportunities, what are the new techniques, what are the new ways we can engage with students, and being mindful of those and thinking about how we continue to respond to the learning needs of students in the future. It's kind of wired into our culture in many ways, and so we want to continue to keep incentivizing that.
Yeah, and some of those innovations are even things, that are bigger picture, like, you've been deeply involved in, for instance, the Indivisa system. So a system is a totally, it's an innovative approach to higher ed where we can partner with a place like Christian Brothers University and not necessarily merge with them, but have a partnership that really helps both institutions to thrive. So these innovations, small, sometimes inside of a department, and then large institutional innovations, all are really, really crucial to
and
our
just
future.
remaining open to those opportunities as they come available to us.
But I think if people do have ideas, it's almost like the first one and the last one are bookends, because the first one is about preparing our students for evolving environment, professional environment where they need to have new skills. But I feel like the fifth one, or are there five?
Yeah,
the fifth
five.
one is like applying that kind of same spirit to ourselves. Like how can we be as creative as possible with what we do in our work? Either, and that could be really big, innovative idea, or also could be people could come to an open session and say, I think I know how we can do something better at the university.
Yeah.
And that would fit the spirit, think, of this pillar. Yeah.
A really horrible thing, I shouldn't close on this, but this is a metaphor that came into my, we have a linguistic, but it feels like a club sandwich, right? You got the top, bottom, you got these great things in the middle, not great, but that's like, there's this thing where between those two, as you're saying, there's this whole spirit, of thinking around innovation for our students, but also thinking about it for ourselves. Like we have to be self-reflective on what does a university look like that's innovative. Anyway, any last comments?
I know we're over time.
Yeah, we're
Thank you,
over
Ray.
time, but Ray,
thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, it's like I said, it's very exciting. The future is very exciting. I just want to thank everybody for watching and wish you all a warm weekend, but have a great weekend. Many blessings to you and all those that you love.